Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I am delighted to be joined by John Paul Mason for what is the Thursday Bulletin. JP, you were at the game last night. What was your overall thoughts on that performance and that victory?
Oh, really pleased. Just because at this moment in time, you don't really know what you're going to get. A Celtic home game in terms of, the last game, Motherwell 1-1. I would have thought that would have been a 3 points no-brainer, but you just don't know. And then you see the team and you're like, okay, it's freshened up a bit. There's Awata's in there and O's in there. Mikey Johnston's in there starting for, was it the first time in thick end of 2 years?
Mm-hmm.
But definitely merited on his second half showing against St Johnstone. So I approached it with kind of cautious optimism. Obviously, it's the same time. The games are both being played at the same time, so you know what's happening at Tynecastle. Although they were 15 minutes behind, no surprise to see. In the same way that Aberdeen are considered fodder for Celtic, I think Hearts are considered fodder for them. I don't believe that, by the way. I don't think that there's this sort of Aberdeen raise their game or they only play 4 games a season or 5 if they get them in the cup. I think that's nonsense. I think the smarter ones of their persuasion kind of more look under the bonnet and go, well, why are our team not playing as well?
Exactly.
And why are our team not matching that? So anyway, but last night was good. Get an early goal, which everyone thought was Carter Vickers until they announced that O had his second goal of the evening, and you're like, I didn't get that there was a touch. So it was a touch, but I mean, I don't know if they had an argument about it, about who was getting the goal. But
who would you argue with, CCV or O?
Well,
quite the argument.
As indeed. It was having been at the Easter Road game where we struggled to lay a glove on them. Really, it was good to sort of just swat them aside last night, as we should be doing to a team like that. Certainly at home, anyway. I know Easter Road's always been a bit of a tricky place to go, but it was good last night to just get the 3 points, get a few goals, and it was like the Aberdeen game, the 6-0 game, without being absolutely scintillating. I don't think we were a 10 out of 10 last night. I think we were probably more a 7.5. And if a 7.5 out of 10 Celtic teams scoring 4 goals and only conceding 1, which was an avoidable goal, I've not actually seen. I have seen it back, but there's fingers being pointed at various people for the goal, and I don't know what you think about that, but we can talk about that.
Yeah, it always seems to be the way, JP. Avoidable. The goals that we are conceding are very avoidable. Now, it's fine if it's a consolation in a 4-1 victory, but it's when you really need the defence to be tight that you start to get concerned about that. I agree with you. I don't think we were in top gear, nowhere near it, but it was a comfortable victory. And I think what makes it comfortable is the fact that you're getting early goals in both halves. And that came down to the tempo. The tempo of play was completely different. We're going to talk quite a bit, I think, about this ruthless nature that we're seeing coming out in Brendan Rodgers, and I like it. I absolutely love it, JP. I think that he has come in to Celtic in a different state of mind. He definitely has than first time round. He's come back. He's a wee bit more humble. He knows that he needs to try and build this up because of what happened before, etc. And even in his pressers and the way he's putting himself across up until now has been a wee bit kind of passive, I felt. And, a big part of that as well would be the fact that transfer window, I was talking to you before we came online here. I was just looking at the dates, the timeline of events. So we win the Scottish Cup, 3 days later, Ange's away. 2 weeks after that, Brendan's in. 1 month to the day that Brendan's appointed, we've got our first game. It's in Japan, and it's Angie's homecoming, and he's got a month to prepare his team, completely assess quite a big squad, and deal with the fact that by the time we play Yokohama, Jota's away, Moyes retired, and then Starfelt's transfers in the post. So Rodgers would have known that Starfelt was making moves to leave the club. So we're losing quality. He's assessing the squad. He's getting to know this new recruitment team that have been much lauded during the discussions with those that appointed him at Celtic. And he's trusting them because he needs bodies in the door. And I think that there's been a process since then till now where he's trusting the process, JP. He's like, okay, you've given me these guys. I'll be playing them because the only one that he hasn't actually played has been Kwon. I'll be playing these guys. I'll be assessing them as we go along. And he's come to the conclusion that, wait a minute, we're not in as good a state as I thought we were. And then you're getting the ruthless Brendan coming out firing after the St Johnstone game, telling everybody who would listen that it was the angriest he'd ever been at half-time in the dressing room. And he gets a reaction. Now, he's done it in a different way. He's done it in a way whereby he was like genuinely angry. I go back to the pandemic season, JP, where you started streaming live on Acsom regularly back then. And in time, I've come to the point where I'm looking at the situation that Neil Lennon was in, and I'm thinking it would have been very difficult for him to give players a rollicking because you had this thing hanging over him constantly. These guys are, being very isolated day to day. They're not able to integrate with the new signings that are coming, etc. So if someone's not quite on it, Lenny's probably not being natural with them and going through them. Whereas Rodgers has done it naturally at the weekend, and he got his response last night. And I think he got his response from the first whistle in both halves, and that completely changed the complexion of the game. That high-tempo approach and the early goals. You get that early goal, they've got to open up, and you can really dismantle them then.
They were already going to be opening up anyway because, as Brendan Rodgers said before the game, they're a team that likes to play out from the back. And you could see even in the second half, they were sticking to that principle. A la us under Ange in the early stages where, just we will play out for the back. And that was commented on by a couple of folk around about me, just saying, oh, well, look, they're actually trying to play football and not just like humping it up the park. I just don't know if they don't have the personnel yet for that. And maybe if the manager's given time. I mean, Nick Montgomery seems to be a manager of reasonable stock. And did we discuss this on this? But where else was he on the shortlist for? Was he on the shortlist for another manager's job? Maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, there was somebody, I don't know if it was you or if it was somebody else I was speaking to, but Nick Montgomery was on a shortlist for another job, whether it was in Scotland.
It was probably Jared on Celtics Down Under that spoke about it.
Maybe, yeah. I wish I could remember who it was because I can't remember if it was a Scottish job, if it was something like Motherwell or something like that, or Hearts maybe. But anyway, he's obviously reading between the lines between some of the Hibs fans that I know. Obviously, they were disappointed with last night, but I don't think they're ready to tear it up on him straight away because they obviously look at a game at Celtic Park and being like, well, what realistically are we going to?
Yeah.
How many times have Hibs won at Celtic Park? Not many. They've got the odd point here and there, but I mean, he took a point off us at Easter Road. So, in the same way that you can't really, start having a go at Celtic for the 6-0 against Atletico Madrid when we've drawn 2 each with them at home, I don't think really Hibs could have the same argument against their own manager, losing 4-1 last night versus a 0-0 draw, a month ago or a month and a half ago. So, but yeah, I think obviously you get an early goal in any game, it just means that we're not sort of the pressure's not getting ramped up, and well, to get the second as well was obviously a bonus. And then you really don't see Hibs coming back from that. I mean, I can, when they got their goal, there was a little bit of a kind of, oh, surely they're not going to get another one and come back into this. Because we changed their team by that point, and Carter Vickers is off, Phillips is on. There was a couple of other changes when they scored. By the time they scored the goal as well, so you know what it's like when a team haven't played together that much, and that the understanding can go in between the communication in midfield and at the back and everything else. So there was just a wee brief thought in my mind that I hope they don't get a second. But
there's that doubt. There's that doubt, JP, because you say the rhythm, you lose that rhythm when you make the changes. And I want to talk about some of the changes that were made last night, because it goes back to this ruthless side of Brendan Rodgers that, quite frankly, I'm enjoying, and I embrace it, and I want to see more of that. And his approach, obviously, is such that if you're showing it at training, he's talking about personality at training, and if you show it at training, then you're going to be in his thought process. Mikey Johnston, you brought him up, so we'll start with Mikey. He starts his first game in the best part of 2 years, for Celtic, that is. And I've seen probably mixed reviews online. And then after the game, of course, Brendan comes out, still got the ruthless hat on, and he says he's got to do better.
He does, though. He's right.
He does. Right. He absolutely does. I mean, there was a moment, I'm trying to remember who played the pass, actually. It was a phenomenal crossfield pass. It was either Awata or Matt O'Reilly, and it drops at the feet of Johnston. His first touch is brilliant, and then he tries to take his man on.
Oh, yeah.
And it's always like the end product. And he stressed last night, Brendan, he's no young. It's no like, there's certain things in a player's game you can iron out, but if you continually make the same mistakes, it can keep you at a level that you'll never ever progress beyond. And I think, all the best to Mikey. I don't think he's going to be the long-term answer for Celtic's issues. I still think when everybody's fit, he's way down in the pecking order. He's below Palma and Abada and Maeda, and he's on a level with kind of Jamesy Forrest right now. So he's not a long-term answer. And I think that if there was an opportunity in January, he would probably move him on, if I'm being honest, because by that time you're going to have some of the other bodies back. JP, but fair play, he rewarded him because he's came in for 3 games on the bounce as a sub, and he's made a positive impact. And he didn't have a bad game last night, no. I don't think, but he is the whipping boy. He is this season's Tony Ralston. He's on a very short lease, isn't he? He gets criticised really easily.
I think the thing with any Celtic player when they go onto the pitch and they're wearing, well, they're not wearing that jersey because they'll never wear it.
Unfortunately.
Whenever they're wearing that, I always I'm willing them to prove me wrong if I've said anything about them negatively, and I'm willing to prove the many people that you see online who absolutely slaughter players with, there's a guy I know, I'm not mentioning his name, but he tweeted on Sunday, I think it was at half-time, and I'm sure there's a lot of tweets that people probably wish they could retract. That's why I don't do this whole, stream of consciousness tweeting where you're just like, oh, this is what I think right now, I'm going to just put it online, and then it's there. Because you look back and go, maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe I should.
There's no filter. The emotion, if you just put something out there with no filter and it's emotional, you'll regret it. I told you about, obviously writing on the blog. It's about 7 or 8 drafts before you press publish. Mm-hmm. Now, that isn't part of the process of using social media these days. It's just like, as soon as the thought enters your mind, it's out there. Mm-hmm. And loads of people, and by the way, there's then this abundance of folk who just they'll die on a hill because they've said it. They're not going to go back. That's it. Doesn't matter. Even if they regret it, they're just going to stick by it. Yeah.
There's still a lot of people perished on a hill regarding Aaron Moy. Would they budge on the fact that they didn't rate him and he wasn't good enough and all the rest of it, despite the fact that he played a fairly significant role in about a 2 or 3 month period last season where he was quite easily the man of the match in many games.
He was firing, absolutely.
But the thing with the tweet was about Callum McGregor and just basically saying, I think it's about time we acknowledge the fact that he's not good enough and all that. I'm paraphrasing, but it was something along those lines. And then Callum McGregor smashes in the equaliser, captain's part and all the rest of it. And then all of a sudden there was a tweet came out, oh, great hit from McGregor. And I'm like, literally 20 minutes ago you were slaughtering him and now he's, he can do no wrong. Or I know a goal's a goal and it's not encapsulating of a performance, but that drive and that determination to get that goal was coming from him and obviously deserved that goal. Great hit, only probably slightly outdone by Matt O'Reilly's Worldy a few minutes later. But Aye, no. What were we talking about there? About
we started off with Mikey Johnston. The perception. Once that perception's in your mind, a lot of people refuse to change it.
That's where I was going, because obviously Mikey Johnston just gets annihilated online most of the time, and people don't want him anywhere near a Celtic team or a Celtic squad, and this, that, and the next thing. But I always think that as soon as a player's got a shirt on their back, they should get full support, and because the players can make you look stupid if you've said something about them. James Forrest scored a brilliant goal on Sunday. He's been completely eviscerated by so many people that do things like this, and it's all there to watch back. And James Forrest could score against Rangers on the 30th. Will people just ignore that, close their eyes to it? It's like a girl that used to sit behind me in the Jock Stein stand when I had my first season ticket. She didn't acknowledge anybody else apart from Henrik Larsson. Hartson was a fat B. Sutton was lanky, streaky of whatever, and there was a game when Hartson scored against Rangers. It was 1-0. I think he brought it down, and Sutton hit it on the volley, and it scudded off the turf and went in. It was into our stand, and I turned round just with my hand over my mouth like that, and she was just like, "Aye, whatever." He's not in.
Is she in the comment section today, JP? I wonder. What's her name? Can you remember?
Oh, can't remember. I do remember that she was fond of a half bottle of fortified wine every home game, because you would hear it clinking by half time, and I always wondered how she got it in, but it's not actually that hard to get a half bottle of wine in Celtic Park.
No, absolutely no. But you're right, and the problem is with Mikey is the fact that he's got this long history of being a nearly man for Celtic. Brendan Rodgers is coming in, and he's been spoken about by Matt O'Reilly, for example, about this guy that he's approachable, and the fact that he'll sit and have lunch with him and all this kind of stuff. But this ruthless nature. So on the point of Johnston, on the one hand, Johnston's been rewarded, JP, with the start last night, which he did deserve, in my view. On the other hand, Yang didn't just lose his jersey. He wasn't even on the bench. Completely dropped. And I'm looking at that now and I'm thinking, right, something has happened along the way, be that frustration with, because he was banging on Brendan about quality and, there's been a few contradictions, but, I would argue that away by saying that Brendan Rodgers was not in a position to wash his hands with any of these signings in the summer. He just walked in the building. As I was saying earlier on, he gave his first press conference on the day that Odin Holm was unveiled as a Celtic player. Brendan Rodgers had nothing to do with that signing, but there's no way that he can say these aren't my guys, because you're not going to get the buy-in from 9 players, which is a substantial part of your first team squad. You're not going to get the buy-in from a recruitment team that you then have to work with for the entirety of your time at the football club. And also, the board that have just appointed you aren't going to be too chuffed with you if you come in and say, oh, by the way, that brilliant recruitment structure is rubbish. They're just signing players like they did before, because that's what his frustration was. But Yang dropped like a hot potato. And this ruthlessness, JP, I prefer it to the kind of like Brendan Rodgers that we've been seeing since he came back to Celtic Park. I really do. What's your take on it?
Diet Brendan, as it's been up until now. I know what you mean. I obviously watched the game on Sunday. I didn't make it to the game, but I watched it, and at half time I was concerned. I didn't see the way we were playing. It maybe wasn't as bad as what Rodgers thought it was, but then he knows what the players are capable of far better than us, because he's seen the training, and if he's seen the training at like a high tempo and then the game starts and then it just goes woomph and drops, then obviously he's going to be angry. But I mean, absolutely. I mean, he only really said what everybody else was thinking about the team. It wasn't as if it was from left field or anything like that. I mean, it was refreshing. It was harsh without being, scathing. And the players, when you hear the players' reaction to it, like Callum McGregor sort of said, no one likes being called soft, and we were soft for their goal, and just allowed a very average St Johnstone team to be winning against Celtic. I mean, that was the only time it was. I can't remember the stats that the commentator read out, but it was. There's not been many times this season where we've been a goal down.
11 minutes. 11 minutes against St Mirren.
Is that it?
Domestic, well, in the league, obviously.
Yeah.
Kelly beat us, but yeah, in the league, St Mirren. That was it.
Yeah. So, I mean, that in itself was pretty damning on the team that we were. Again, 1-0 down to a corner that, just like the Motherwell game, it's like one chance, one goal. And you're thinking, is that the sort of the odds now on us conceding a goal? If the other team gets a corner, they know how to do it. And you could see it last night. People have commented. I've listened to some other podcasts as well where people have commented on what teams are doing at corners to Joe Hart, and they did it last night a couple of times. They didn't do it every time, but they did it a couple of times where they kind of crowd Joe Hart, and there's nobody there to protect him. You're putting Greg Taylor there to protect him, and Greg Taylor is hardly a giant. So if he gets brushed out of the way by somebody, then that's your immediate defence of the keeper's gone, and Hart can't really do anything. Matt O'Reilly should have definitely cleared the ball against St Johnstone. I need to see it back, but somebody told me last night that he was held or he was pulled or something at that point.
There was a few things, JP, I was looking at that goal because I was very much just annoyed and angered, a bit like Rodgers and most people. And when Rodgers was asked about that, it's someone being impeded, i.e. Matt O'Reilly, he just said, no, we were just too soft at the goal. But the other things that people were talking about, I've had a look at them, in our resident ref, Sean Connolly from Celtic Down Under, cleared up a few things. So the first one was, there was a suggestion of a handball by a St Johnstone player before it gets to the goal scorer, but it's the old player to hand. So you've knocked the ball off your own hand, so it's no handball. Mm-hmm. And then the other one was that the guy was offside, but he wasn't, because even though Taylor and the St Johnstone goal scorer ended up behind the goal line at one point, this was clarified some time ago that players were using that as a way to stay onside. Remember, they were just going off the park and then running off. So you're still on or offside. And because Taylor was behind the St Johnstone player, he's playing him onside even though he's behind the line. So the final bit of that was, like you say, was Matt O'Reilly impeded? And Rodgers was asked the question, says, no, we were just too soft. So it's one of the ones where every single time there's a goal, you are looking at it to say, right, at what point would Celtic be penalised here? And St Johnstone weren't. But I agree with Rodgers. I just think we were really sloppy and soft. And of all those three different instances, or the three arguments, I don't think we could really stand up and say definitely there was any kind of opportunity for the ref to give us a free kick. Definitely not.
I think, going back to Rodgers, I think there's a definite bullishness about him. Obviously, he's seen off one opposition manager so far. Not that was much of a challenge, though, was it? I mean, I don't think anybody really rates that guy, and be very surprised if he ever ends up in a top job again, especially with these kind of... I don't really like the guy's attitude, to be honest. I mean, Clement has not done anything to offend me, but it's a new challenge for Brendan Rodgers. He's been lauded in the press, and he's, this top manager and everything else. So this is an opportunity for Brendan Rodgers to sort of flex his managerial muscle and be like, right, well, I want to set you aside as well. But see, just going back to the transfer window in the summer, I do wonder what would have happened had Ange stayed. Would all the same players have come in? Probably, because they've obviously all been getting scouted for months. They don't just miraculously appear at the doorstep of Kerrydale Street just with exactly. That they've all been scouted. They've all, maybe Ange has signed them off. Maybe he's had input into the signings of guys like Kwon and Yang and Thiago Holm.
Definitely Tillio. Definitely Tillio, because he was talking about that being in the works for ages as a player. No, you're right. And then you're looking at it, it's still the same level of quality, JP. So Ange, I'm pretty sure, would have been frustrated with that as well, particularly when you lose the 3 first-team players, 2 to transfer, 1 to retirement, and we've not replaced them with quality. I'm going to ask you, actually, how many of the 9 do you think come into that category of quality? Because the one that's coming closest so far would be Palmer. Do you think he is a guy that you think, right, he comes into that quality category? Or is he still someone that we need to develop to get to that level?
I think well, just from my very, very novice eyes watching him, I would say definitely he's got room for improvement. I mean, watching him last night, he hasn't set the world on fire in every single game. For example, against Hibs in the reverse fixture at Easter Road, he wasn't good at all. I would have given him 5 out of 10 in that game because he didn't do anything to contribute to significant chances. He didn't really get many shots away, and that's what you want from a guy like that. And he's proved that he can do it. So I think yeah, there's definitely development there. Nawrocki is probably the other one because you've spent a lot of money on him. I mean, last night, I can't remember at what point in the night, but a couple of my friends were like, "Oh, what do you think about the Nawrocki Lagerbielke thing?" And I was like, "What?" And with a bit of heavy lifting, they'd gone from Rodgers saying that they're fit and available, and then I think he was asked, well, "What does it take for them to get involved?" And he went, "Well, it's about personality." And they've then taken from that he doesn't fancy either of them. And I don't know if I would go that far. It may be the case that he doesn't, but I mean, Nat Phillips, obviously he likes him, and he came in last night. I know you wanted to talk about him. Guy behind me that was with Sean. Sean's pal was obliterating Phillips at every opportunity. Like, I can't believe that guy's in 70 grand a week, and it's
scary.
Basically saying he was good in the air, but that was all he was good at. And I wasn't watching it going, "Oh my God, he's horrendous." I've seen a lot of bad centre halves at Celtic in my time. As have you. there's been a number of them.
Quite a few. The thing with me is with Phillips, I think that again, there's all these different moving parts. JP, right? Stephen Sloan comes in to make the same point here. Nothing I've seen from that Phillips suggests we should be keeping him beyond January. Why then is he ahead of our 2 centre halves, bought for a combined £7.3 million in the summer? And are they not good enough? Well, I think that Brendan Rodgers was in a situation there. Obviously, he's brought in an emergency scenario. Have we, and it was something raised by Kevin Graham a week or two ago, have we made an agreement with Nat Phillips that under normal circumstances we wouldn't have humoured, in that he's got to be in the squad? Because you've got to consider that. There are often situations where a lone player goes to a club and is guaranteed game time, JP, or he's guaranteed to be in the squad. And I think because we had our backs to the wall and we were really struggling for centre-halves at that time, we've maybe agreed to something that ordinarily we wouldn't agree to. So you've got that point. You've also got the point that at the beginning of the season, when we were doing the deals for Lagerbielke and Nawrocki, Liam Scales wasn't really the guy that we now know him as. Liam Scales was a bit part player who, had Aberdeen come up with the cash, he would have been away. And he's come to the fore, and his resurgence was completely unexpected. So there's a couple of elements there. And then, of course, he's looked at Lagerbielke and Nawrocki. And we don't know how far back those deals have been in the works. We really don't know how long it's taken to get those players over the line. Is he seeing as much from them as he is from Scales and Phillips? Certainly not. Carter Vickers in training? Well, the answer's clearly no. And he's spoken quite a bit about Phillips' personality and how he's a good influence on the training park and all this kind of stuff. Well, you would expect that because of his age, because of the league that he's coming from. People going about his experience. I've already pointed out he's not played many games actually in his professional career. But Phillips is getting the nods up until January, I would suggest. And at that point, it will be reassessed, JP. Whether or not we'll still have him, I don't think we will. But at that stage, you would look at it and say, right, that's been a very expensive emergency because you've paid a loan fee. You go back to Shane Duffy, right? The last kind of centre half, big name centre half, or from a big league. It cost us £2 million as a loan fee, and we paid 25 grand a week towards his wages. Now, if it was something similar for Nat Phillips, you've got to say, with hindsight, it's not been worth it. He's definitely not been worth it. But we were in a situation where we had to make the signing. We absolutely had to make the signing at that point, didn't we?
Yeah, no, we definitely did. But I wonder if his the fact that he's English and the fact that his communication might be better in terms of, because there's so many different nationalities at the club, to have someone who's communicating in English to a bunch of guys whose natural language isn't English, then that might be a factor as well. Because I mean, obviously, it sounds from interviews with Lagerbielke and Nawrocki that they both speak English well, but I don't know if that would be considered a factor. The fact that you've got a guy there who maybe he's got good patter. I don't think that's worth 25 grand a week or 70 grand a week or whatever it is he's getting, because you don't just have people there to.
How's James McCarthy's patter? Must be brilliant.
Did you tell me, or was it on this show, that somebody saw somebody training on their own in a park and they went closer to him and it was James McCarthy?
Oh, no, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. It's how far out he is from proceedings. I mean, actually, I do think about the player, JP, the person, in a scenario like that, right? Because I'm not going to say they're a victim, because obviously the wages involved, etc., but this is their career. Can you imagine all week in your job, doing all the admin, doing all the preparation, and never getting a gig? I mean, it would be frustrating as hell, wouldn't it? It would be like me constantly doing my prep, which I do every single day for the show, but never being able to go on and actually talk about it. It would be frustrating as anything, and it would be demoralising. And that must be hugely demoralising. We were talking about Mikey Johnston not starting a game for Celtic in 2 years. James McCarthy, when was the last game he started for Celtic? That was a long time ago now. And
I mean, there'll be loads of people in the comments going, get out the tiny violin for James McCarthy. I'm sure when he looks at his bank account, he'll know be too downhearted, and that there might be an element of that, but at the same time, he is a Celtic fan. I'm sure he came here with, as Brendan Rodgers has said in an interview, the guy's a Celtic fan and he's come here with all good intentions, and things just haven't worked out. But we sat here when he signed and spoke about this signing and went, well, let's see what knowing his injury record, and I said, let's see in a year's time what his numbers are, what his appearances are, and we're now 2 years down the line, and
the third season, exactly.
Third season, and there isn't any evidence there to back up the signing of James McCarthy, which is,
it really isn't. But to be banished, I mean, that is horrendous. You know, on a human level, that's horrendous. It's not going to do anything for his confidence, for his state of mind. But like you say, we did, and like you said earlier on in the show, whatever you say is out there. At the very offset, we looked at it. When you look at the figures, and we're talking minutes now, rather than just appearances, substitute appearances, minutes. The equivalent minutes that he played for 5 seasons prior to coming to Celtic, both with Everton and Crystal Palace, was on average 9 full games of football a season for 5 seasons. Now, I know he had his cruciate ligament damage, etc., and that would have contributed to that. But for 5 seasons, JP, on average, he played the equivalent of 9 full games of football. And we signed him and gave him a 4-year deal. So alarm bells are ringing straight off the bat. Now, I've not looked at it. Obviously, he's never kicked a ball this season, so I don't know how this affects the average. But in his first 2 seasons at Celtic, he played the equivalent of an average of 6 games in the first 2 seasons. 6 games each season. And for the outlay, even though there's no transfer fee, for the outlay of wages, the fact that he's another jersey in an already bloated squad of 32, it doesn't make sense to me. And I think we were in a situation with Nat Phillips, not so much Bernardo. You know, you could argue the toss that we had enough midfielders in there. We didn't really need to bring in another. But with Phillips, we had to shell out something. But with hindsight, you're going to look at that and say, you know what, it's not been value for money. James McCarthy's the same. But to be banished, I'm sorry, I'm on the same bus as you when it comes to this, JP. I look at the human level and think, right, okay, so if it's not worked out, let's move you on. You can't stay at the club. Go and play football and enjoy your football. You might have 1 or 2 seasons left in your legs. It's not here. But go and do it somewhere else, because that's not going to be good for anybody, JP.
No. It's interesting as well to think back at the signing of James McCarthy. I don't recall there being this huge sort of mad excitement and fanfare from everybody that we'd signed him. You know, there was no. I mean, we were signing a Premiership midfielder who at one point was starring for Everton and was a regular in the international setup and everything else, and was definitely earning way more than he's earning at Celtic right now at one point. There was another midfielder that came to Scotland in the last couple of years that had a similar background who was lauded. We know how that ended though. I'll leave it at that.
We all know how that ended. He, in his own mind, is revised history. JP, I don't know if you watched the recent interview that he did or snippets of it. No. Oh my word! We talk about Joey Barton here. The man.
No. We're talking about Aaron Ramsey.
Oh, him. All right. So there's a couple. And no, you're right. But Joey Barton.
Well, his injury record before he went there was horrendous as well. Like when he signed, I was not in any way concerned. I was like, well, no. I mean, yeah, okay, he scored against us, big in a defeat, big deal. But I was like, I would be a wee bit concerned about that guy, given his injury record, and I would definitely have kept my powder dry until he'd done something. And unfortunately, he'll be remembered for something.
Absolutely. Someone in the Scottish media said that it was the most sensational signing in Scottish football in the last 20 years. Who was it that said that?
It was Boyd said it was a Gascoigne-esque signing.
Oh dear.
You know what you're going to get from him.
I thought you were talking about the bastion of women's football, Joey Barton, who last night, I don't know what he was thinking about on Twitter, but obviously he had that issue that we spoke about earlier, where he had a moment or two, and he put a few things out on Twitter about women's football, and he'll not regret it, because I don't think he's got the brain power to regret it. But yeah, these people come up to the game, they think they're going to scoosh it, they don't, and they leave. But the issue we've got at the moment is there's non-contributing footballers, JP, and I think when Brendan Rodgers came in, he already identified the size of squad he wants to have. And he actually spoke about having 17 of a core group, which extends to 25 if you've got like fringe players, development players, youth players coming through, prospects. We've currently got 32. And we're already talking about bringing in new left backs, bringing in new strikers. There's going to be business done in January. But whatever business we do, you've got to offset it by getting some of these bodies out the door. I mean, 32. So already the long list already has another 7 players on top of that. You're not going to shift them out in one transfer window. No chance. But it's going to take maybe 3 or 4 transfer windows before we get the squad trimmed down to the size that Brendan wants it at, because as well as shifting guys out, he's going to be bringing 2 or 3 players in as well, you would expect, in most transfer windows. Including
perhaps a striker in Bojan Majowski, which...
What do you think of that?
I'd be into it. I'd be into it. I've heard enough from friends. My friend James was always going on about Majowski, more so than Duke. He's an Aberdeen fan. He's scored consistently. He scored in Europe. Somebody last night was saying in the pub, "Oh no, I see that as another Nadir Chifchi," and I was like, "Nah, that he's several levels above Nadir Chifchi." I didn't want Nadir Chifchi when we signed him. I was quite adamant about that. I knew it wasn't going to be a successful signing. I don't know how. I'm not Mystic Meg, but I just had this very, very strong feeling that Chifchi would not be a success at Celtic. I also didn't want him for the whole biting patter, which I dislike Luis Suarez immensely for that, and that seems to be airbrushed out of his career history. But the Chifchi thing was, I just didn't really fancy him as a Celtic player. But Majowski, and then people obviously they move on to the transfer fee figure and everything else, and Aberdeen are wanting north of 4 million for him or whatever. Like, we can't be paying 4 million to Aberdeen for a player. And I'm like, wait a minute, no. So is that like the same? We wouldn't pay 3.5 million for John McGinn from Hibs because it's Hibs. John McGinn's now just signed a new deal at Aston Villa, which will probably see him on 100 grand a week or north of 100 grand a week, and he's playing in a top 4 Aston Villa side under a top coach. and Unai Emery. I mean, them beating Man City last night, huge result. We were in the pub beforehand, and I said Aston Villa can go above Man City if they beat them tonight. And the guy I was talking to was like, no chance. They'll never beat them and all that. I was like, there's 7-2 to win at home, and he was like, you know how that's going to go. And obviously, there's a part of me going, well, yeah, he's got a point. I mean, it is Man City, but Aston Villa have been playing well. They beat Spurs at their own ground recently. So anyway, back to Majowski. Paying 4 million to Aberdeen or 4.5 million to Aberdeen for Majowski, if that's what they want and that's what the bidding is at, if it's there's clubs down south or there's clubs in Europe or whatever that are also in the frame for him, absolutely. Why wouldn't we? We paid 6 million for Hartson and Sutton 20 years ago. Why would you not? Like, I don't get this. Oh, we can't be paying that to Aberdeen. I mean, I would be happy if Aberdeen got the money that they wanted for a player that's done well for them and that they're going to lose and there's then going to be playing against them in the league. That's how clubs develop, and as long as they use the money that they get and spend it wisely, because there's so many clubs that when they do get transfer fees in for players, whether it's I don't know, whether it's McGinn from Hibs or Ferguson from Aberdeen, Calvin Ramsey from Aberdeen, as long as they recycle that money and use it well, then I've got no issue with it, because it strengthens the league. And that's what we used to do. You can rhyme off countless signings that we've made in the past from other Scottish clubs, going way back. Jock Stein would sign players from other
absolutely.
Scottish clubs.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be something that's sort of the nose is turned up on. I don't really get that attitude, because if you've got a player on your own doorstep who's a proven goal scorer in the league, I mean, Rangers fans are absolutely livid that they haven't got Shankland, that they didn't go for Shankland, that they went for these guys like Dessers and Lammers who can't kick a barn door. And they've got a guy who's banging them in for a Hearts side that they've now swatted aside 3 times, and they could have had potentially a guy in Shankland. But there's a lot of them, their supporters as well, who turn their nose up at signing players from Scottish teams, and you're just like, it's a no-brainer. The Scottish League is the bread and butter. I've said it so many times. People go, oh, it's only, like, I tweeted about Forest scoring on Sunday, and somebody replied and went, come on now, it's only St Johnstone, we've been terrible today and everything else. I'm like, that was a really important goal. They nearly equalised, and then we went right up the park and killed the game, and James Forrest scored the goal.
What a finish, by the way.
It was a great finish, but this idea that you know, you're only thinking about the Champions League. Champions League, yes, absolutely, we need players for Champions League. I don't dispute that. But Scott McDonald came in and scored at Scottish level.
32 goals. Yeah,
and scored in the Champions League.
Yeah.
There's definitely others that probably aren't coming.
Stokesy. I mean, he was a guy, JP, and again, I'm not saying that these are the people that would take you to another level in Europe. I'm not saying that at all. Scott McDonald scored against AC Milan. Lee Griffiths scored in Europe for Celtic. Lee Griffiths, I know we didn't sign directly from a Scottish club. We signed him from Wolves. But he spent his entire career, other than a short spell at Wolves, in Scottish football.
Against Anderlecht in our last victory in the Champions League 6 years ago.
6 years ago. I mean, you're talking about Stokesy. Stokesy scored against Celtic the last time Hibs beat us at Parkhead. It was Anthony Stokes that scored one of the 2 goals. But I was accused of having snobbery of signing players from the Scottish game because I don't fancy Shankland. Majowski's a different kettle of fish. Patrick yesterday.
Shankland's 29. I wouldn't want us to say that.
This is the thing. And what I was referring to was in the chairman's message when the financial results were released, he basically broke down the 2 category of players that we sign. And the first category was what has up until now been called the project player. This is a player that we can buy in, we can develop, and then we can sell them at their optimum value. And it's in black and white. Peter Law will say this is what we do. The other one is the player who can affect the team instantly, who can come in and affect the team instantly. So there's 2 different types of player. And you think, well, which category does Lawrence Shankland drop into? Because he doesn't drop into the guy you're going to develop and then sell when he's at his optimum. Hearts will for me, they'll be trying to get a big transfer fee for Shankland as well. Of course they will. he's their star player. There's no way I'd be shelling out millions of quid for the guy. And I'll tell you why, JP, right? His age profile for a kickoff. There's also been occasions in his career in Scottish football where he's gone to a club and he has looked like a completely different player. He has had an up and down career. He's earned a move it was Beershot that he earned his move to because he did well at Dundee United. And before you know it, he's back at Hearts. He didn't do it at Aberdeen. He did it at Ayr United. So it's been up and down.
He didn't do it at Greenock Morton, as my colleague Dave McGeechan has told me on several occasions. Like, we didn't do the business for Greenock Morton. Yeah. So in his eyes, that means he's a failure in Scottish football.
The entire career's written off. No, but he has had an up and down career. I wouldn't go for Lawrence Shankland. Miovski, Patrick McGourt doesn't fancy him. I would rather go for Fitzgarden personally, but I think the fee would be too much for someone who's not going to be guaranteed. However, Fitzgarden falls into that age group that you can develop and sell on at an optimum fee, etc. So it's all about.
Miovski's only 24. He's only
24. Yeah,
I think that's a good age to get somebody. And put it this way: if Brendan Rodgers is willing to get out, what were those trainers he was wearing at St. Roch's? Were they Gucci or Prada?
They were Louis Vuitton.
Louis Vuitton, right. So if he's got Louis Vuitton trainers, I could only imagine the value of his pen. But if he was to bring out his whatever pen he has and sign on the dotted line for Bojan Miovski, then I'm absolutely happy with that, because if it's a Brendan Rodgers signing and he's all in, chips all in, not a terminado statement after it, if he's all in on that signing, then get him in the door in January, because you want the manager to get the players that he wants. That's it. That's 100% it. He hasn't had a Scott Sinclair yet. He hasn't had a Dembele yet. He hasn't. None of those signings. I'd be interested to know actually on the Dembele.
Phillips? Do you think Phillips was he signing?
Probably, yeah. Yeah. I mean, given the last minute nature of it,
yeah,
it's not something that's been in the works. Phillips may have been on a list that the club had, but I think given the Liverpool connection and everything else, he's probably looked about and went, right, who can I ask for a favour here? But see, going back to your timing of the home signing versus Brendan Rodgers being announced, what was the timing on Dembele getting signed for Celtic when Rodgers came in? I mean, how long had Rodgers been there before Dembele came in the door?
Well, I remember mentioning first time round when Rodgers came in and there were signings like, and I mentioned Toure, Dembele and Sinclair, because in my mind, JP, I just thought they were Brendan signings, and probably lazily because he had the knowledge of English football, etc. But someone corrected me and said that the Dembele deal had been in the works already, and it wasn't a player identified by Brendan Rodgers. It's one of these things. Often you'll never know for sure. You can always just look at it and say, right, did he play the player? Well, Sved wasn't his signing, was he? Compere wasn't his signing. But Dembele, I'm pretty sure Rodgers will try and claim that he was his signing. But I'm not sure 100% if he was. This time round, Phillips, I'm thinking, I know their paths didn't cross at Liverpool, but like you say, there's a Liverpool connection there. He's got the knowledge of the league. He'll be well aware of the player, having no doubt, played against some of his sides anyway down south. And I think that if that is the case, and you listen to Brendan Rodgers and the way that he's standing up for Phillips and what he is bringing to the table, even though it's not in the park, you think he's defending that player because maybe it was him that wanted him in the door. But the circumstances would suggest, even if he was to go back, you wouldn't say, Nat Phillips has been a flop. He came in for a short period of time and then he's gone back. When it comes to the strikers, if reports are to be believed, and Rodgers has had someone scouting Miovski all season and he fancies him and he thinks he's worth £4 million, then you back it. You absolutely back it. And it's not as though he's going to be paraded like a marquee signing, JP, because he is coming in as backup during initially the Asian Cup. And then he's got to prove to the gaffer, you're going to be my number one. Can he do it with O and Kyogo in front of him? Who knows? But I tell you, I speak to obviously Kevin McCluskey, who watched him with interest when he was at MTK Budapest. And Kev admits that when he left and came to Scottish football, he wasn't sure at that stage that he would make it. Kevin can come on and discuss this himself. of course, but he wasn't sure that he would be as much of a success as he has been. And if you imagine, he's not played in a particularly good Aberdeen side, yet he's been
For the
prolific.
majority of the time, no, he hasn't. Definitely.
You know?
I mean, neither did Liam Scales. So
exactly, yeah. And then you've seen the performance levels of Scales where he's come into a system that works better for him with players who are of a higher calibre and higher quality.
And by the way, Liam Scales will definitely, obviously we're absolutely speculating. There was just a barrage of media reports yesterday that Miovski was on our radar, so that this could be complete nonsense and may well be shot down in the next press conference when Brendan Rodgers is asked about it, because it would have come out yesterday, or was it the day before? Because the day before was the press conference. So surely to God, somebody, if the story was out, surely somebody at the press conference asked him, and I don't think they did. So he's not commented on it yet. So it could be nonsense. However, with the speculation cap on, Liam Scales is a very good source to tap on how Miovski is as a person, a player, what he's like in training and all the rest of it, because he's actually been there and done it with him. So if Brendan Rodgers has scouted him and got the watching eye of a scout who only sees what he does on the grass, Liam Scales can say, well, he's this type of person, he's into this, and would they fit in with the squad? Because if he's talking about personality being a key factor, you don't want to bring in somebody that's not got the right personality to adapt. You don't want to go and spend $4 million on somebody that's going to be out of your plans. So I think that's a fair thing to consider when you're signing a player. Obviously, I mean, he tells us that.
No, definitely. Listen, from the 4 names that I've seen, Miovski, Fitzgarden, Van Hooijdonk, Shankland, I'm not sold on the Van Hooijdonk thing, because we asked Pierre about it on the 31st of October, and at that point Celtic had shown no interest whatsoever in Sydney Van Hooijdonk at that point. Van Hooijdonk obviously was the agent of Nadir Chifchi when he signed for Celtic, by the way. So I never really forgave him for that.
The best thing about Chifchi that I ever heard was that story that McGeady told on Open Goal about the time that he bought like a fancy pair of trainers, or it was down in London. He couldn't believe the money that he was on at Celtic, and he went down to London and bought a pair of, I can't remember. I don't shop in shops like this, and I don't buy when I buy a pair of trainers, I usually buy Nike or Max. But he'd bought these trainers with like these spikes in the front, and they're like rubber spikes, kind of look like the Legion of Doom from the WWF thing.
I'm visualising it.
And obviously they're really expensive, and he bought them, and then he was walking around with them, and he was like, "Oh, I can't believe I've spent it was like $2,500 or something he'd spent on these trainers." And then I think he got the fear of the fact that he'd spent so much money on them, so he took them back and tried to get his money back, and they just gave him a credit note. So he had a credit note for this shop, and he got absolutely slagged in the dressing room, I think,
That's obnoxious. That's an obnoxious waste of money. But there you go. I mean, when it comes to the signings and it comes to Brendan Rodgers' approach, something came to my mind. He signed, when you're talking about players and how they react as well to maybe the hairdryer treatment, JP, and the bit of tough love. I think a lot of players need it. Martin O'Neill has spoken about, obviously, Alan Thompson. And Alan Thompson had been a really, highly rated player at Newcastle, bad back injury. He ends up, he plays for the first team, but he doesn't really make it at Newcastle, goes to Bolton to get first team experience. Really makes his name for himself in that brilliant Bolton side that, he played alongside Alan Stubbs and all these guys. John McGinley, you'll remember. Mm-hmm. And Andy Walker was part of that team as well. Stevie Fulton for a spell. And he gets the big money move to Villa. I think it was £4.5 million back then. And then eventually loses his place. I think it was John Gregory, and O'Neill more or less turns his career around at that stage. But in his first game against Rangers, in the season that we talk about, the 6-2 game, we go to Ibrox and Rangers beat us 5-1.
I was there.
And was it 1 each? I think it was 1 each. I think, did Larsson score the equaliser, and then they've just absolutely bombarded us. But a pivotal moment of the game is Alan Thompson gets sent off in that game. And in the dressing room
for the square goal with Lovenkrands.
Aye.
Lovenkrands went down pretending he'd been headbutted, and man, it happened really.
Mm-hmm. He gets sent off. And after the game in the dressing room, Martin O'Neill called Alan Thompson a coward in front of the entire team. So it's going to go two ways, isn't it? It's going to be, right, that player's not going to play for you anymore. Or he's going to go the other way and he's going to prove you wrong. And if you look at the next game against Rangers, it was the game that we win 1-0 and Thompson scored that absolute screamer. Remember that was just a beautiful, beautiful strike. So that's an example of how you have a go at a player and it can go either way. And thankfully, it looks as though it's gone the right way for Brendan Rodgers this time round. Now, that's one example of many. When you look at what's happened to the players who have been dropped as a result of Mikey Johnston coming in, Yang dropped from the squad, O comes in, Kyogo's dropped, Awata comes in, David Turnbull's dropped and doesn't get any game time. So this ruthlessness that comes through. Two things I want to point out, though, before I go into the comments section again. When you look at his minutes, right, he's now played 1,063 minutes for Celtic over last season and this season, scoring 12 goals. No assists, by the way. Talking about ruthless. That's a goal every 88 minutes. That's a tremendous record. And this season, it's 94, every 94 minutes. So he is definitely deserving of the jersey. The other thing I was going to say about Palmer when I was asking you what category player is he in, one thing that annoyed me about him last night was he got booked, and it was a stupid booking. He's already served a ban this season. So I had a look at his career. He's actually played 136 senior games of football, Louis Palmer, in his career, and he averages either a sending off or a booking every 8 games. So that is an issue that he needs to sort out, because you need to have your full complement of your players. You can't be going into big games, JP, and because it was a stupid booking last night.
We went to Rome and we didn't have him available, and we had to play Yang and Forrest as the starting wingers against Lazio in a must-win game. And the reason Palmer wasn't there was for dissent against Madrid and over-celebrating a goal that didn't even stand, which I give him the benefit of the doubt on that, because I still think that's a nonsense. Like, that card should be maybe not rescinded in the game, but it should be rescinded afterwards. Like, I don't understand that. I think that's a nonsense. The goal didn't even count, you know. How do you disallow a goal, especially how narrow, like wafer thin the decision was? Like, it barely came off my head as boot, and he's offside. But yeah, I think you're right, though. I mean, you can't lose your discipline, because we don't want to be in a situation where we're having to play Yang and Fort. No disrespect to either of the players, but neither of them should have started in that game. Like, that should have been Palma and Maeda. I would have said in that game, and it was two completely different players who are way down the pecking order instead.
Yeah,
I was glad to hear Maeda and Abada are close. And hopefully they'll be back. Certainly, maybe not the weekend, but hopefully they'll be in the squad for the Feyenoord game, which is a dead rubber, I know, but we have to win that game. We don't have to. We don't have to do anything in it, but just to get this. I mean, 10 years, no Champions League game won at home. And I know that in all those 10 years we've not been in the Champions League, but I mean, we're good enough on our game to beat Feyenoord. We drew with Atletico Madrid at home. We definitely should have beat Lazio at home had Palmer stood. And we were just very, very unlucky to get absolutely sucker punched at the end. But I don't think this Feyenoord team are anything. Yeah, there you go. I don't think this Feyenoord team are anything to be feared at home, regardless of the nature of the fixture and the fact that it doesn't mean anything. I think we should go into that with our tails up. I think, and with a point to prove about this season's Champions League campaign, because it's been really, really frustrating. And the Madrid away game aside, I don't think with the personnel that we lined up with against Lazio away, I wasn't entirely confident. We weren't blown away by them. We took them to the 80th minute, and I genuinely thought that we would potentially nick it in the last 10, but it wasn't to be. They bring on Immobile, and he does what he does. But I think I go into the Feyenoord game optimistic. Obviously, we've got Kilmarnock away on Sunday, which they got a really good victory last night at Pittodrie. Last minute, some goal, by the way. you see it?
I've not seen the goal. I've seen that it came in late. Yeah, there was a couple of late goals last night.
Really nice goal. Guy takes it and takes a touch to take the sting out of the pass, and then on the turn, basically kind of chips it up for himself, and then swivels in the volley. And I don't think any keeper saving that, to be honest. They took it really well, but for it to happen in the 92nd minute against a team coached by your former manager is a bit of a dullion for them. But so Kilmarnock will be hard on Sunday. It always is. They've beaten us there already, but I would think we'd have enough in the locker to go there and get a victory.
You would hope so. I think back to the game. Remember the game last season where we absolutely obliterated them in the first 40 to the point where Kyogo missed a penalty and laughed about it because we were absolutely destroying them. And I think we were 4-0 up after half an hour, JP. And second half was a different story. It can go that way. And I think on that particular day as well, thinking back from memory, Awata played. And Awata was massive for me last night. We've been talking about him all season, singing his praises. I think what he does is he offers a right good bit of protection in front of the two centre halves, but he also allows McGregor and O'Reilly to roam. He gives them a bit of licence to roam. And he's got to keep that jersey, JP, because I think since Hatate has gone out, Bernardo's had game time, and so is Home, and so is Turnbull, and all to varying degrees of success. But Awata came in and he looked so assured last night. I think he's got to keep the jersey.
Yeah, I thought it was really. I mean, there's been an experiment in that third midfield spot for the whole season. Really, everybody's had a shot at it, but nobody's really put both hands in it. And last night, I thought Awata was really good. He was busy. There was elements of Maeda to him at times where he was just always suddenly he was there. If a Hibs player in midfield or coming out from the back had the ball and it was passed to him, Awata was there to sort of intercept it. Some people don't agree with the Awata praise. My mate Chris is going to be a dad, and he had some conversation with his pal Robbie, or our pal Robbie, last night, and Robbie was like, if Awata starts 10 games, I don't know if it was 10 games in a row or 10 games full stop. If Awata starts 10 games this season, then Robbie said he would buy Chris a pram for the kid. That's how sure he was that it wouldn't happen. So the first thing I did when I heard that was just send a link to the most expensive pram I could find online, and I was just like, I think you might be in trouble. And then he came back with help, and then a link to a GoFundMe. The GoFundMe page. So based on last night, I think Awata should start another 9 games. I would be shocked if he didn't, but obviously that would then, I don't know what the loophole was there. If it was to be 10 games consecutively, I think that might be unlikely, but you never know. I mean, he did play really well last night, and the manager clearly likes him. And you go back to what he did before he came here, he was the most valuable player in Japan. He's not this sort of footballing nomad. He's also a bit older, is he 25?
26, yeah.
26? Mm-hmm. Well, there you go. I mean, a guy like him should be starting games at the club, and it's just all about the balance, I suppose, and how he plays with Matt O'Reilly and McGregor in particular, because they're the two people that he has to properly gel with. And then if he clicks with them, then it should click everywhere else. But Ralston did well last night when he came on.
So did I. And I think there was also another message. There was another shot fired by Brendan Rodgers in putting him on at left back. And that shot fired was at Burnaby to say, listen, mate, I'd rather play a right back in your position. And I think that it's going back to the tagline, the ruthlessness of Brendan Rodgers right now, I am loving it, because it's now, let's just cut through all of this. The fact that we've got 32 players in the squad, and we really need to start shipping them out. If you're not contributing, go. Get them out on loan, get them out permanently, JP. I'd rather have Tony Ralston playing left back than Alexandro Burnaby. And you know, that's a fact, and Rodgers showed it last night. I've got to thank everybody for getting involved. I know JP and I, we only speak once a week normally, and when we do, we've got to really get stuck right in about the old Celtic chat. Marquis, we're a team of Hart, AJ, CCV, Scales, GT, Iwata, O'Reilly, McGregor, Kyogo, Palmer, just before showing off. I think it would work. You'd need to obviously, I think, put Kyogo out wide, which he can do. I gave a team yesterday which was a 3-5-2, but it would mean that you wouldn't be playing with your fullbacks. And in certain occasions at home, I think you would get away with that. The Urban Culture. Is there any way of having Owen and Kyogo on the pitch together? Is a must for Kilmarnock. For me, I think has to play against Kilmarnock. I don't know what Rodgers is going to do to get Kyogo back in form, but he's going through a wee dry spell at the moment, and I'm sure he'll be managed back by Brendan Rodgers. Now, I predict, says Brian McGinty, a 2-0 win against Feyenoord, and Francis is also saying that there is the financial implication of getting a win in the Champions League.
Absolutely. I know, totally. No, I wasn't forgetting that. I do accept that's a huge thing. And the coefficient and all the rest of it. I mean, it might be a dead rubber, but a win in the Champions League surely means, regardless of its nature, whether it's the sixth game or the first game, surely that does help the coefficient. And we're accused of obviously bringing that down. I don't know how far it goes down when you get beat off Aris Limassol, who are 263rd in the coefficient ranking, but getting beat off Lazio, who are 37th or something like that. I don't think it's not great, but it's not the embarrassing shame that it could have been.
Some would have you believe. Yeah, this is the thing, JP, and if we win that game, and I agree with you, I think there's a possibility that we could, and I do think we're capable of winning the game against Feyenoord. If we win that game, we end up with double the amount of points in the Champions League this season as we had last season.
Which is progress.
And the Celtic board will say, well, you know what, we didn't do that badly in the transfer market, did we? You know, and then all of a sudden they're armed with this argument that, well, we're doing okay, all right, we got knocked out the League Cup, but, and there's always this but. So you've got to look at it in context as well. I think it'd be brilliant to get that monkey off your back, get the win in the Champions League, get the win at home, get the points on the board. It galvanises the team that you've got out that night as well. I think if you look at the home ties this season, JP, Atletico Madrid, amazing result. Lazio, dreadfully unlucky. Feyenoord, get the win. Then you've got something to work with and move forward with as well. Listen, I appreciate in the comment section, I haven't been able to bring as many of you in as possible. But again, we will be back tomorrow at 12:30. So please join us. Thank you all for getting involved as always. If you want to come along to the Acsom Christmas night out, it's happening a week on Monday. It's when me Albie, it's in Gracie's. And I'll be there. Hopefully JP will be there, and many other members of the Acsom team will be there as well. If you want to get a ticket, there's a few available. Just click the link underneath the video. And we'll be back tomorrow at 12:30. All that's left for me to say, JP Mason, thank you for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers, Paul.